Hi, I'm Dr. Joel Kreisberg.
And I'm Reggie Mara. And we're here today to talk about narrative healing. And so, just to kick this off, Joel, can you speak a little bit to how you actually use narrative healing in your coaching?
Yeah, thanks, Reggie. It's key to the way that I practice coaching is that I want to hear my client's story. I want them to understand a bit about where they come from, but really what story are they telling themselves about their process, and story are they actually, can they learn about how they began to heal? That's key, how they heal, and then how they can access that in the coaching process. That's my short answer. How about you?
Okay. Well, I'm actually not a practicing health coach per se, but I can say with 100% confidence that in all of the coaching topics that my clients engage, healing is a big part of the process. Just off the top of my head, one client simply wanted to be able to communicate more effectively.
Hmm.
Another wanted to be more flexible and adaptive in her job
Hmm.
as a leader.
Hmm.
And in each of those cases, what we work through are their respective abilities to tell a different story, first about how they are,
Ah,
and about how they might grow into this being better able to communicate or being more flexible or adaptive. So the prospect of healing, which I like to interpret as coming to terms with things as they are as a first step,
mhm.
seems to be, if not everywhere, very, very, very close to everywhere.
Actually, it's interesting. So I appreciate what you just said. So it's not just changing your behavior, it's actually changing the story or the way you perceive what you're doing as part of doing things a different way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think the two things go hand in hand.
Yes.
It's possible to change behavior without changing the story. My personal bias around that um, is if you begin to lose the behavior or if something else changes the behavior, there's no real awareness about the change.
Hmm.
And then it's also possible to change the story without changing the behavior, in which case it's a fun narrative exercise, but doesn't really get you to move in the world in a different way. So I like being able to encourage both myself and my clients toward both of those a behavioral change, an external shift, and also an awareness of what's behind that and what it might lead to in terms of the story they tell about it.
Right. No, it's wonderful. So there's a balanced approach. That balance, you could say that as objective and subjective, or some
Sure.
people say interiors and exteriors. But so the idea is, because often, in the more conventional health coaching model, we're focused on people want to change their behavior. They want to I want to lose weight. I want to, feel differently. And so there's a way of, it's not just creating specific behavioral targets. It's understanding the how I feel, how I experience, what is the story that goes along with the way I am right now, and then when we try and construct that new way, which is, I've lost 10 pounds, I have a whole sense of self that goes with that, right? So I understand the
Sure.
story that goes with it.
Yeah, I think that one of the great examples that's out there about that is one of our guests on Vital Conversations, Robert Keegan, who developed the immunity to change process some years ago, but his new work with Right Weight, Right Mind basically asks people to find the story behind why they lose weight and then gain it back, lose it again and gain it back. Um, if they only change what they eat and how much they eat, the weight always comes back. But once they change the story, the success rate is significantly better. So
Yeah,
I
well,
think,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, no,
go
interesting
ahead.
to that is the story often has a conflict in it, right? So he would say, I believe he would say that there's competing needs in the story. And
Yeah,
so by uncovering the story, you actually are able to uncover some of the different, the different competing needs that are there. And then, so then when you construct the new way, and then you can, well, there's two things I want to say. One is you can begin to sort of prioritize which story is more important, which need is more important. So then you can start to do growth exercises or awareness exercises, because you use the word awareness. You're creating awareness of some of those needs in order to better inform the change of behavior, but you still got to change the behavior.
Right.
And the other thought is, and I want to throw this into the conversation, the healing resources. So the idea is that you can tap into, I use the fancy word salutogenic, but the health-generating behaviors and stories that we have. So very often we actually have these resources that we can bring in to help create the new way, which is the new behavior and the new story. But we've had experiences in our past and resources that we can tap into as part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And one of the questions I ask myself, and I also ask, my clients when it comes to the behaviors is, is this next step something that will move me toward my goal? Or is it something that would actually stagnate me or limit me in getting to where I want to go? And if they can unpack that question, what they very often will find, and this is getting just to mention what's the last step in Robert Keegan's approach is testing big assumptions.
Yeah.
Many of us just carry a belief system that we've never really tested, and sometimes we test it and it's true. Sometimes we test it and it's not true, but either way, we get to test it. And that's the behavior that can lead to a significant change in our story.
And so what we're doing is working with our mindset. And so we're saying that we're not favoring mindset or story from behavior. We're saying that you need to work with both. So I test out the story that goes with that behavior to see if it's true or not. And I may find that, that actually isn't. I wonder if we can think of an example about that. How a story can. I'll think of an example for me, because I was working through Right Mind, Right Weight, the title of the book, Keegan's book on weight loss. About the story is one mindset for me is that eating foods, comfort foods, is a way that I have a treat.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. That's a story that I can tell myself. So in a way, ultimately, I had to examine whether that's why is that the way that I need so much, why do I need food as a treat to sort of say I did a good job? I'm not coming up with an example, but I am giving you an example of a mindset. So I had to begin to look at other ways of sort of rewarding myself when I did things that I liked.
Yeah. So could you just follow that up for people who are listening to this? So if you did make the move from treating yourself with comfort food, what were you able to substitute for the food?
Well, it caused me to stop and think about what are some of the other things that would be a treat for me. Actually, I can think of a really simple one, which would be just to sit back and relax and watch a TV show. That I don't watch much TV, so you have to put it in context and just say, well, I'm going to just relax and watch TV for half an hour and have that be a treat versus actually having something sweet and going back to work.
Okay, sure.
I would have to something sweet and go back to work. And it's like, well, and I'm going to just sit back, and that would be really well, and that would work. Not always as well, but that was like I reward myself with something. So the need for reward was really important. That came up for me as one of the mindsets that led me to eating a lot of too many sweets.
Yeah, good, great example. So that just goes to show that there is no particular right or wrong way to do this. There's not this prescription of these are things that are that we should be doing, or these are things that we shouldn't be doing, but it's finding out what our current beliefs are, what our current assumptions are, what our current story is, and finding ways to grow beyond that to an alternative or an alternate story that serves us better than the old one.
Well, actually, interesting, because I just thought I made a connection, which is, well, how did I learn that particular story? And that was because my mother fed me. The way that sweets were delivered in my house, that's how I felt like I was successful. It's kind of like when you have a great baseball game, you get to go get ice cream.
Okay.
anything. That was the way I was rewarded. So then realizing that are there other ways that I could reward myself that would be healthier?
Yeah.
So, and this is where this is really good. We can pick this out because so that's the traditional story that's very unconscious, which is the reason why I'm having that is because that's the way I reward myself. I'm naming that really what's going on is feeling a need to reward myself. Now I was like, well, what healing resources do I have in order to find other ways of rewarding?
Yeah.
Right. Actually, another way that I can reward myself is actually I love pruning my fruit trees. Right.
Okay.
Like I'm really busy, I don't do it. And so it's kind of like I've worked enough. It's a beautiful day, go outside and go climb in my trees and really kind of have that experience. And then I feel filled up. But you see, that's tapping into some of my healing resources, which is some of my healthy behaviors that I could pull in some way. But having the mindset that I'm doing this as a way of learning to reward myself in a healthier way.
Yeah, I like that. Just if I could just say that back to you. So you went in that particular case, you moved from the comfort and the joy of the comfort food on your taste buds and how good that feels and how it tastes, and any kind of physiological response your body might have to whatever the comfort food is, to actually going out into a physical activity in the natural world, even though it's not growing in the wild, and doing something for a few minutes or half an hour that physiologically, emotionally, probably even spiritually um,
Yeah.
invigorates you or calms you down or whatever it happens to be. So it's a different kind of comfort, but it's still comfort.
Yeah, that's a really good example. Yeah, it's funny because I just did it yesterday afternoon. Actually, I didn't watch some of the. I didn't really need to watch the second, the second quarter of the football game because I actually really wanted to go, be in the trees. That was the
Okay.
thing that was going to, reward me. So let's focus this now to if we're health coaches and how do we use this technique specifically, right, when we're coaching. So how would you answer that question? How would you use it? How do you use healing narrative or narrative healing in your coaching?
So it begins with the conversation in which I try to get to the heart of what it is the client appears with and would like to change into. So in that conversation, I'll get a story about how things are. I'll receive that from the client, and together we'll take that story and try to word it into a topic, a healing topic.
Mm-hmm.
Once that healing topic is more or less in place, it can get tweaked as we move forward, as the dynamics of the coaching take place. We'll work together to try to come up with what we'll call learning or growth objectives that will work toward in the process of coming up with a new or a revised story,
Yeah.
and go from there. And typically, in my practice, I know it's true with you as well. What I give the client to do, when I say I don't force the client, but I offer it, and he or she accepts it or not, involves both doing something and also an awareness of what they're doing and why.
Right. Yes. And interesting. And I know that you're really good at getting your clients to write about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a little bit harder time actually doing that so that people can hear that not everybody wants to write about it. But one of the reasons why we like this language of narrative healing is because there's a way of, by writing, you get to experience that story change in several different ways. One is having to actually put it out there on paper, right? And then you also have the opportunity to read it and reflect it and change your relationship with that story. I mean, there's a more formal way of describing that. Can you tell us the more formal way of describing that?
Well, I don't know if it's the more formal way, but I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, I'm a writer and a poet, so I have a bias here, and I tell all my clients up front, this is how I work, so everybody knows they're going to be expected to write.
Yeah.
But there's actually over 30 years of empirical research now on what happens when we write over an extended period of time, in terms of both broadening and deepening perspectives. So that I trust implicitly, and I know from a direct experience that the writing opens up things that might not get opened otherwise. So I don't know if I answered your
No,
question.
you did great. So that was a perfect, because that's a broad answer versus a specific answer. And so the bottom line is we're both using narrative in our coaching process, but we're supporting the kind of behavioral changes, which is often the outcome that the client's walking in with.
Yeah.
So, and because we're going to run out of time, we really wanted to take time to just talk about we're using narrative healing in our actual coaching. And if you'd like to know more about it, we actually have a class that's been approved for continuing ed by the ICF that starts in March, I believe March 2nd. Uh, and then we also are going to do a 1-hour webinar, I believe it's February 24th, where you can learn about the whole approach, because of course the class is a 12-hour class on the actual tools that you can use to actually bring this into your coaching program. The webinar is the outline of the whole program, and so I hope that you can join us on February 24th. You can see on the website the dates and the logins, but this is just a taste of it, of what it's like.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and I hope to see you on the 24th of the 2nd.
Yeah. Thank you, Joe.
All right, take care, Eddie.